This is a list of regular cast members of the 1950s British radio programme The Goon Show and the characters they portrayed. Harry Seacombe, Neddy C. Goon, Uncle Oscar, uncle of Henry and Min, a very old pensioner. Henry often asks, "What are you doing out of your grave?" Quote, who usually jabbers incoherently but soon collapses. When he is coherent, he can be heard inquiring as to the whereabouts of his teeth. Or, as in The Call of the West, he loses them. Henry remarks, "There go his teeth. Min, more dinner for us." In the £50 Cure, he is the first to be turned into a chicken after drinking Minnie's laundry soup. Private Bog, one of Major Bloodnoke's soldiers who is usually picked upon to do all the dangerous, scary jobs that Bloodnoke himself is too afraid to do. However, Bog does appear as a civilian in The Greatest Mountain in the World. He announces himself as sex, male, name, Bog F, Superintendent, Ministry of Works and Housing, and declares that Henry Crun's artificial mountain in Hyde Park will have to come down. Quoting Section 9 of some obscure regulation, no mountain weighing more than 8 pounds 10 ounces and measuring more than 20 feet may be built within a radius of Nelson's Column. Quote, he then lays 2 lighted sticks of dynamite, which Eccles mistakes for 2 cigars. Nugent Dirt, the first victim of the Phantom head shaver of Brighton. His wife Prunella takes him to court, and after a 3-week trial, Judge Skinora finally pronounces sentence. Now, then, Nugent Dirt, the jury of 3 just men and 29 criminals finds you guilty of hiding your bald nut from your wife until after you had married her. Therefore, I sentence you to pay a fine of 3 shillings = 60 years in the nick. Dirt replies, I'll do the 60 years, I'm not throwing 3 bob down the drain. Quote, Izzy, based on the Jewish comic Izzy Bon. Welshman. Seacombe also played various Welshmen, e.g., a lorry driver in Wings Over Dagenham, and a navvy in The Scarlet Capsule. Members of the news group Walt Fan Goons refer to most of these characters as Seacombe Bark. In the beginning of the episode The Thing on the Mountain, all 3 goons, with Milligan as Adolphus Spriggs and one-liner Singy's Things, imitate Welshmen. In Wings Over Dagenham, Seacombe's Welsh character is named Di. In The Mighty Wurlitzer, the first part of the story is set in Wales. Seacombe, himself a Welshman in the role of Sea Goon. Milligan, playing a cat, and Sellers, Olamide Jones, end virtually every sentence with the Welsh word bark, which means small. Occasionally, a Welshman will refer to his Sparty bark, roughly translated, my little friend. Seacombe dryly remarks after Milligan's lines, that's the first time I've heard a cat bark. Quote, Yorkshiremen, when there was a need. Seacombe would often play the part of a Yorkshireman, usually unnamed. One example of Seacombe's Yorkshire accent is in the episode Lurgy Strikes Britain, where he plays a bus conductor in Oldham, although the town is in Lancashire. Some of the outlying villages of Oldham were situated in the West Riding of Yorkshire at the time. The first victim of the dreaded Lurgy. He also uses the accent as a workman in The Last Tram from Clapham, and as the manager of the East Acton Labour Exchange in World War I. In the Macreekey Rising he plays a dim Yorkshireman on guard at the Tower of London, using the name of Fred Nurk. Spike Milligan, Eccles, Minnie Bannister, Moriarty, Throat, Sergeant Throat, Miss Throat to Gladys, with the very gravelly voice. Milligan invented this voice by belching, apparently in the middle of rehearsal, much to the producer's annoyance. Little Jim, whose single line, "He's fallen in the water," became a national catchphrase. According to a recent TV special about Spike Milligan, the phrase was originated by Peter Sellers' young son. In the last Goon Show of all, It was revealed that Little Jim was Achilles' nephew, and that apart from "he's fallen in the water," only Eccles could understand Little Jim's speech, even Little Jim and himself having no idea. Spriggs. Adolphus. Later Jim Spriggs, aka Jim Pills, who makes frequent appearances on the show. He often repeats his lines in a high-pitched falsetto and calls everybody Jim, pronounced G-E. Quote, also known to be a singer of sorts. In the histories of Pliny the Elder he serenades Julius Grithpipe Caesar, whereupon the latter remarks, Brutus Moriartis, this man is a bit of a crawler. Why does he follow such a profession? Moriarty replies, for money. Caesar, he tells me he wants to die rich. Grithpipe, and so he shall. Give him this sack of gold, and then strangle him. Single quote. Notably, in a few episodes, actors other than Milligan, such as Kenneth Conner in the 50 Pounds Cure, would attempt to imitate Spriggs's habit of singing the word Jim at a high pitch, resulting in a fervent contest with Milligan as to who could hold his Jim longest, sometimes interspersed with the character asking, "Are you taking the mick?" Single quote. Mr. Banerjee, one of a pair of Indian characters who carry on a lengthy conversation, sometimes about how best to carry out a given task, and using typical Indian syntax. Yakamoto, Japanese character who can be found as Heidelberger's sidekick, e.g., Napoleon's piano and the canal, or as a Japanese army officer, e.g., the fear of wages. Corblimey, unnamed character who pops up to say, "Corblimey, I'm off," whenever something dangerous is about to happen. Voice very similar, and possibly related, to throat. Things. Havaldar Singh's Things. An Indian idiot, usually found as Bloodnoke's servant. The various Indian characters in the show derived from Milligan's childhood in India, where his father had served in the British Army. Hugh Jampton, Captain Hugh Jampton, an army officer who made brief appearances primarily as a means of getting an indecent joke past the BBC censors. The name would scan acceptably in the script but could be said suggestively during the broadcast, as Huge Hampton. Hampton is Cockney rhyming slang. Hampton Wick Dick. Penis. Fu Manchu. Fred Fu Manchu, Chinese bamboo saxophonist, appears as the eponymous villain in The Terrible Revenge of Fred Fu Manchu. Makes minor appearances in a number of other episodes. China Story, The Siege of Fortnite, e.g., and The Lost Emperor. Peter Sellers, Bloodknock, Grithpipe Thin, Blue Bottle, Henry Crun, Cynthia, Roe, Rose of England, a breathy nymphomaniac femme fatale from Earl's Court. Neddy's occasional love interest, with a jealous lover called Raoul, played by Ray Ellington with a George Sanders partner. Jilted for an elephant. In The Scarlet Capsule, the local residents need to be evacuated for fear of an unexploded bomb. See Goon, as Ned Quatermass knocks on Cynthia's door, and when she answers, he says, "I'm sorry to knock you up so late." Quote. Pause for the double entendre to sink in, to which she replies, "They all say that." Quote. William, mate, Cobbless. William, mate, Cobbless. Working-class Cockney idiot, who played all sorts of roles, including soldiers, policemen and various menial servants. His catchphrase, "You can't park, mate," was a Goon joke that took a swipe at officious BBC commissionaires. Sellers used a similar voice for trade union leader Fred Kite in the movie I'm All Right Jack, based on a hardware store owner known to the Goons. When asked, "What kind of wood is this?" he would respond, "That's solid wood. That is, mate." In the Goon Show script books he is revealed to be related to Grithpipe Thin, Mr. Lalkaka, one of a pair of Indian gentlemen. The other, Mr. Banerjee, was played by Milligan. On occasion, however, the roles were reversed, with Sellers playing Banerjee and Milligan Lal Karka. Conversations between these Indian characters occasionally used Hindi obscenities that both Milligan and Sellers had picked up. These were usually the subject of complaints by, surprisingly, elderly ladies. Heidelberger, German anti-hero, Sometime Drive, Frankenstein, Who Invented Eccles, aided and abetted by Yakamoto, Camp Commandant of Stalag 10, 12, and 13, and Nominal Capitan, and Seagoon's accomplice in the plot to steal Napoleon's piano from the Louvre. His full name when he first appeared was Dr. Hans Heidelberger, but he later became Justin Heidelberger, as in, Justin Heidelberger. This was another way the goons would slip words that were then banned from radio into the script. The voice that Sellers used for this character was similar to that which he later used for Dr. Strangelove, Flower Jew, camp person who makes infrequent appearances. Although one of the earliest established characters, he was absent from the show for a long period and reappeared in the middle of the show's run. Flower Jew is a dab hand with a sewing machine, especially when, as in the nasty affair at the Burami Oasis, Seagoon tells him to run up a flag. Also appears in the histories of Pliny the Elder, when he tells Seagoon to shut up. It was perfectly quiet till you came along. Quote, Seagoon replies, "You're a sailor, and sailors don't care." Quote, and in the string robberies, Seagoon's train arrives in Scotland with a great blast of steam. Flower Jew is mortified. There should be a law against trains letting off steam when people are wearing kilts. Comparable with the characters Julian and Sandy from Round the Horn. Cyril, a Jewish character, with an aversion to non-kosher water. Bloodknock, being stereotypically British, is anti-Semitic. When, in King Solomon's Mines, Cyril is indeed drowning in non-kosher water, Bloodknock exclaims, "Goodness! A crocodile making straight for Cyril." Quote, fires, and then exclaims tersely, "Got him, now to get the crocodile." Quote, Frednerk, who, in the affair of the lone banana, vanishes from right under his mother's nose. Seagoon asks, what was he doing there? Headstone the butler. Sellers replies, it was raining at the time, I believe. Another Jewish reference, see Max Kongskeldre. Gladys, a strange sexless thing that continually changed its voice and responded often with the phrase, yes, darling. Single quote. This part was also played by Ray Ellington, e.g.C. Rommel's Treasure, and by Wallace Greenslade. Personal narrative, Lou Ernie Cash, another Jewish character, a nasal stereotypical voice, usually a fast-talking theatrical agent or impresario, e.g., The Greenslade Story, who cajoles actors in the wings with two broken legs to break another one. Based on a friend of the goons. Occasionally appeared as a judge or magistrate, sometimes called Skinner. He was based on the impresario Lou Grade. Churchill, Sir Winston Churchill, who makes regular appearances as the PM, looks for bits of paper in odd locations, approves crazy projects like atomic dustbins for the Christmas Islands, and is suspected of throwing batter puddings at Clement Attlee. He once knocked off Constable Willem Mate's hairy police helmet in order to borrow it for a Christmas party. Hearn, Ernest Hearn, Hearn, also Hearn Sales, an American character used for narration. Outrageous announcements, parody sales pitches. The goons referred to Americans as Hearns, possibly because saying Hearn sounded American to them. Hearn also had his own running gag when introducing the listeners to a scene in a parody of American documentary films of the time. We turn to scene where no human eye has ever set foot. Quote, and more. It is a measure of Peter Sellers' vocal talents that he was able to speak all Milligan's characters so accurately that Spike's absences from the show were undetected by listeners until the final credits were read. An example of this is the episode The Makriki Rising, featuring a harrowing exchange between Henry Crun and Minnie Bannister. Sellers had to take both sides of the conversation and clearly had trouble remembering which voice to use. On the single occasion when Sellers himself was absent, in Who is Pink Oboe, 4 other actors and comedians were recruited to fill in for him. He also occasionally used a Laurence Olivier voice, later employed to great comic effect in his 1960s recording of A Hard Day's Night, as a cod Shakespearean speech. Michael Benteen. Benteen was part of the regular cast for the first 2 seasons. As a tribute of sorts, unheard characters called Benteen are sometimes referred to in later episodes. E.g., The Man Who Never Was. Osric Puri-Hart, the archetypal absent-minded professor, famously eccentric and possibly mad. Puri-Hart, at one point, created the Suez Canal after getting the rights after Cleopatra's death, despite the fact he waited 2,000 years. Hugh Jampton. Bentine's character. See Milligan's character above. Other members. Andrew Timothy, the show's original announcer, who left the show after the first few episodes of season 4, claiming that he feared for his sanity. He did, however, make a brief pre-recorded appearance in The Scarlet Capsule. I would like to say that, whilst I read this stuff, I don't write it, Fantine. Single quote. And returned in 1972 for the last Goon Show of all. Wallace Greenslade, announcer. He opened and closed each show, often parodying the traditional BBC announcing style, and occasionally played himself in an episode, most notably The Greenslade Story, as well as other small parts. E.g., he was the Phantom Head Shaver of Brighton. Wallace was also noted for what Harry described as playing the part of the French prefect of police, and playing it very badly, in Tales of Old Dartmoor. In Insurance, The White Man's Burden, Greenslade opened the show by introducing himself as Wallace the Pelvis, and singing "See You Later Alligator" in a proper BBC announcer's voice, prompting Milligan to remark, "Put that pelvis back." Quote, Ray Ellington, not related to the Duke, and his quartet, singer, bassist and drummer. The popular Ellington Quartet acted as rhythm section for the show's orchestra. Ellington, whose father was African American, also occasionally played small roles, mostly as African or Arab characters such as Chief Ilinga, spouting much gibberish masquerading as Swahili. Shake, Rattle and Roll, The Nasty Affair at the Burami Oasis, The Wad of Char, Shifting Sands, and The Red Bladder, and various Scottish and Irish characters. A lot of the jokes involving Ellington these days would be considered racist. In The Jet-Propelled Guided Naffy, he was called Black Rod, a reference to the British parliamentary office of the same name. And although his thick African-American accent was nothing like Scott's, several jokes were made about him being in the Black Watch. E.g., The Treasure of Loch Lomond, in Ill Met by Goonlight. See Goon. Eccles and Bloodknock are part of the commando raid on Crete, when Seagoon complains that, although the party numbers 4 men, he's only been given enough blackface paint for 3. Grithpipe tells him that Ellington is the 4th man, whereupon Ellington shouts, "It ain't fair, just 'cause I got a sun lamp." In 1985, he stands in for Barbara Kelly, and when asked by Grithpipe what her line is, replies, "Colored television." Another instance of Ellington's skin color being used as a gag occurs in Under Two Floorboards, where, as Lady Seagoon, he announces the theft of the blue shower necklace, and threatens to fetch the police. Seagoon remarks, at the mention of the police, Everybody turned white. Ellington retorts, "Get me a mirror." Quote, Max Geldray, Dutch jazz harmonica player, but no actor, occasionally the butt of Jewish jokes, and more frequently, references to his nose, not for nothing known as conks. His verbal contributions usually consisted of short lines like, "Oh boy, my conk's still making the headlines." Quote, "I got it bad, and that's not good." And, as a taxi driver picking up Goon, "Where to, darling?" Quote, Wally Stott and his orchestra, the house band. Stott was a well-known British band leader and arranger, whose other credits included numerous recordings for film and singing star Diana Dawes. He also composed the music for Hancock's Half Hour. George Chisholm, one of the show's regular musicians, sometimes called upon to play Scottish characters, e.g., The String Robberies, Wings Over Dagenham, The Taybridge Disaster, The Macreekey Rising, The Spawn Plague. He was invited to the last Goon Show of all but had to decline, responding that his trombone was stuck in his tartan down in Bournemouth. Guest appearances: John Snag Doyen of BBC newsreaders who, like Greenslade, also played himself in several programmes, usually in pre-recorded inserts, and was a great supporter of the show. Snag had a prominent part in the Greenslade story, when he was present in the studio instead of being pre-recorded, and read his part in his best "Here is the News" voice. Valentine Dyall, Radio's Man in Black, often called upon to play sinister characters, appeared as the Sheriff of Nottingham in Robin Hood. The Christmas special Goon Show made for the General Overseas Service in 1956, appeared in The Canal as an amateur brain surgeon attempting to murder his children, Neddy and Eccles, as well as Lloyd's insurance salesman Bluebottle. For the insurance money, appeared as Baron Seagoon in Drums Along the Mersey, with an elaborate scheme to smuggle £1 million out of England. Appeared as Dr. Long Dongle in The House of Teeth, a mad medic driven to knocking out men's false teeth and painting them black to fulfill a promise of 50 pairs of castanets to his Spanish flamenco dancer girlfriend Gladys La Tiger Nutter. Appeared as the creepy caretaker of Tintagel in The Spectre of Tintagel. Appeared in a rare non-sinister role as Lord Cardigan in The Giant Bombardon, which was set during the Crimean War. Deputized as Grith Pipethin for an indisposed Peter Sellers in Who is Pink Oboe. Appeared as himself as a count in The Silver Doubloons. In the beginning of The Canal, Dyall is announced in his usual manner, as the Man in Black, with a gong beat, only to read out, "Listeners, a funny thing happened to me on my way to the theatre tonight. A steamroller ran over my head." After a brief laugh, he mutters, "So much for humour." Quote, Charlotte Mitchell stepped into the breach on the rare occasions when the script called for an authentic female. Cecile Chevreau, another authentic female, made a cameo in African Incident, being found in a compromising position up a tree with Major Bloodknock. Jack Train made 2 appearances shifting sands in And Who is Pink Oboe, reprising his role as Colonel Chinstrap from ITMA. Chinstrap fitted into the Goon Show framework surprisingly well, demonstrating the debt the Goons owed to ITMA. Dick Emery stood in for Seacombe as Emery-type Seagoon in Spawn, and replaced Milligan in a few others, alternating with Graham Stark. Emery also appeared in the closest thing to a Goon Show film, The Case of the Muckanese Battle Horn, which also featured Sellers and Milligan but not Seacombe. He went on to provide voices for the Beatles' Yellow Submarine, and was popular in his own television sketch show in the 1970s. Kenneth Conner stood in for Seacombe in The £50 Cure, as well as appearing as William Mate in Who is Pink Oboe, in place of Peter Sellers, who was ill. A. E. Matthews appeared as himself in The Evils of Bushy Spawn. Dennis Price appeared as Prince John in the Goons' Christmas special broadcast of Robin Hood. Bernard Miles appeared as approximately himself, complete with his best bucolic accent, in The Rent Collectors. On other occasions, e.g., in The Silver Doubloons, he was himself parodied, probably by Peter Sellers. Graham Stark, a good friend of Sellers. Stark made his first known guest appearance in show as Prince Charming in the show's pantomime special, Cinderella. Stark later filled in for Sellers alongside several other actors in Who is Pink Obo. At the time of his death, Stark was the last surviving actor to have appeared in The Goon Show during its original run. Litzbeth Webb, the first known rare female presence on The Goon Show. Webb played the title role in the show's pantomime special, Cinderella. The ultimate source from which almost all Goon Show character lists on the internet have been derived is Wilmot, Roger, Jimmy Grafton, 1976. Goonography, cast list. The Goon Show Companion, A History and Goonography. Robson Books. p. 88. ISBN 0-903895-64-1. Character descriptions were given in 2 of Milligan's books of scripts. He has written a backstory to his characters which is not always consistent with the scripts. Milligan. Spike. 1973. 1972. Introduction. Goon Show Scripts. Sphere Books. ISBN 0-7221-6079-8. Milligan. Spike. 1974. 1973. Introduction. More Goon Show Scripts. Sphere Books. ISBN 0-7221-6077-1.